Welcome back, everyone, to The Deep Dive. Ready to explore how to make our worship experiences even better.
Always ready for that.
Well, today we are going to dive into this devotional article
Oh, nice.
from prayeray.com called Elevating Our Worship. It was published just yesterday on November 28th, 2024. And one of the things that really caught my eye
Yeah.
was this idea that it's not just about going through the motions. It's about connecting with something way bigger than ourselves.
That's so true. It's easy to just get stuck in the routine, right? Like we
Mm.
can just go through the motions
Yeah.
and completely forget about connecting with God on a deeper level.
Yeah. The article really emphasizes that true worship requires both spirit and truth. What do you think about that?
Hmm. When I read that, I immediately thought about how worship in spirit
Mm.
is about that deep down, genuine connection. Like it's not just about singing the words.
Yeah.
It's about feeling them deep inside yourself. It's almost like you're pouring your heart out to God. It's raw and vulnerable.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it can't just be about emotion, right? Because the article also talks about truth.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. That's where the knowing God part comes in. And this is really interesting. The article kind of suggests that studying and learning more about God can actually make the emotional experience of worship even more powerful.
You mean like the more you understand God's character and love for us, the deeper your worship becomes.
Precisely. It's like the knowledge is what fuels the fire, so to speak.
It's not just about feeling good, it's about understanding why you feel that way.
Yes. And, it can also lead to a deeper appreciation for all those rituals and traditions. They start to make more sense and become even more meaningful.
I see what you mean. Like if you understand the symbolism behind a certain prayer or hymn, or you learn about its history, it adds a whole new dimension.
Absolutely. The words become so much more than just words, don't they? It's like this bridge connecting us to something much deeper, something ancient.
So speaking of connecting, the article talks about elevating our worship. What does that even mean? Is it just about trying harder?
Well, I don't think it's just about effort. It's more about intentionality, recognizing that worship is an ongoing journey, not just a destination.
Okay.
We can always find new ways to connect more deeply and express our reverence in a more genuine way. And it's also about asking ourselves, how can I make my worship truly reflect how much I love God?
I like that. So let's get practical. The article mentions a few ways to elevate our worship, like prayer, study, and mindful appreciation. Where do you think we should start?
Well, how about we start with prayer? The devotional actually goes into a few different kinds of prayer. It talks about contemplative prayer, for example.
Contemplative prayer.
Yeah, that's where you just sit in silence and you just kind of open yourself up to God's presence.
Ooh, that sounds a little intimidating, to be honest. I always find it so hard to quiet my mind.
I hear you. It takes practice. But the article actually has some helpful tips. Like, it suggests focusing on your breath or repeating a simple phrase in your mind. Just something to help quiet all those thoughts that are always racing around.
It's kind of like those mindfulness exercises you hear about, like, in yoga and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, the devotional also talks about petitionary prayer.
Oh, right. Where you bring your requests to God.
Exactly. But it warns against just, rattling off a wish list.
Yeah, like he's some kind of cosmic vending machine.
Right. It's more about honesty and vulnerability, acknowledging that we depend on him, expressing our trust in his plan.
I know I need to work on that. Making time for prayer is something I always struggle with. Life just gets so busy and it's so easy to let it slip.
Yeah, I get that. But the article encourages us to just find little pockets of time throughout the day to connect with God.
What, like little mini prayers?
Well, yeah, kind of. Like maybe you pause for a moment of gratitude before meals, or, you offer a silent prayer while you're commuting to work. Just little things like that.
That's a good idea. It's like weaving prayer into the fabric of our lives rather than trying to treat it like a separate chore.
Exactly.
So, okay, we talked about prayer. What about the study part? I have to admit, I sometimes find it hard to connect emotionally when I'm doing something intellectual. How can we find a balance?
That's a great question. The devotional actually have a suggestion for that. It says to approach study with a sense of wonder and curiosity, rather than just trying to memorize facts.
Hmm.
It encourages us to really ask those tough questions, wrestle with those difficult passages, and let the text challenge our assumptions.
So it's about engaging with the material on a deeper level, right? Not just
Wow.
with our minds, but also with our hearts.
Exactly. And it also suggests choosing study materials that really speak to you on a personal level. Like
Right.
maybe it's a specific book of the Bible or a commentary that helps you understand what you're struggling with right now, or even some devotional poetry that moves you.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've covered prayer and study. What about this mindful appreciation thing? What does that even look like when we're talking about worship?
That's where things get really interesting. Mindful appreciation. It does sound a bit more like, something you'd hear in a meditation app than in a devotional.
Right. Like, how do we even connect those two things?
Well, it's all about paying attention, really.
Yeah.
It's a way of noticing and appreciating the presence of God in our everyday lives.
Okay, but how does that translate to worship?
The devotional talks about cultivating a sense of gratitude and awe for the simple things in life. It's like recognizing God's hand in creation, you know? Like
Hmm.
when you see a beautiful sunset and you're just like, wow, this is incredible. Exactly. Or maybe you're looking at a flower and you're amazed by all the tiny details. It's about recognizing those moments and offering a silent prayer of thanks.
So we're basically turning those everyday moments into little acts of worship.
Precisely. It's like finding those sacred spaces in the midst of the ordinary.
I love that. So it's not just about big formal acts of worship. It's about those small everyday moments of connection.
Right. And, the devotional even takes it a step further. It suggests that this practice of mindful appreciation can actually change how we interact with other people.
Oh, really? How so?
It encourages us to see that divine spark in every single person we meet, to treat everyone with kindness and compassion, because we're all God's creation.
It's not just about appreciating nature, it's about appreciating humanity too.
Exactly. And it even says that our work can become a form of worship when we approach it with dedication and purpose,
Mm.
like we're offering it to God.
That's a cool way to look at it. It's like shifting your mindset from, ugh, I have to do this to I get to do this. Like it's all part of a bigger purpose.
Right. And it's not about being perfect or expecting something in return. It's just about aligning our actions with our beliefs and doing our best as a way of worshiping God.
I can see how that would be really transformative. And not just for our spiritual lives, but for our well-being in general. Like,
Mm.
if we approach everything with that kind of mindset, it would probably make us less stressed and bring us more joy.
Oh, absolutely. It's about finding that place where our passions and talents connect with our desire to serve God.
That reminds me of a quote from the devotional that really stood out to me. It said, "Let my life be an act of worship." It's such a powerful statement.
It is, isn't it? It really makes you think about how even those small, everyday things we do can be expressions of our faith.
And that's what I find so appealing about this devotional. It's not about adding more to our to-do lists or feeling guilty if we don't measure up. It's about finding ways to make our lives more meaningful and recognizing that every moment is an opportunity to connect with God.
I agree. It's about that shift in perspective,
Hmm.
seeing the sacred in the everyday and approaching life with a sense of reverence and gratitude.
And it's not about being perfect, right? It's about always trying to align ourselves with something bigger than ourselves, even though we know we're going to mess up sometimes.
Exactly. It's a journey.
Mm.
And the beautiful part is we're not alone on that journey. We have God's grace to guide us, His love to support us, and His presence to comfort us.
That's a really comforting thought, especially when the world feels so crazy and overwhelming. Knowing that we have that anchor, that constant source of support can make all the difference.
Absolutely. And that's where the real power of worship comes in. It's not just about feeling good or fulfilling some obligation. It's about tapping into this source of strength and peace that can help us through those tough times.
So if we're talking to our listeners, what's the main thing you want them to take away from this deep dive into elevating their worship?
Well, I think the key takeaway is that it's a really personal journey. There's no right or wrong way to do it. But by incorporating those elements of prayer, study, and mindful appreciation, they can build a stronger, more authentic connection with God.
And it doesn't have to be this huge, overwhelming change, right?
Not at all. It could be as simple as making one small change,
Mm.
like maybe they commit to just 5 minutes of prayer each morning, or they set aside a specific time each week for study.
Or even just taking a minute to really appreciate a beautiful sunset
Sure.
or enjoy a delicious meal.
Yes, it's about those small, intentional moments that can add up and make a real difference over time.
Yeah, it really is amazing how small changes can make such a difference if you stick with them.
It's like anything else worth doing, right? Like those tiny seeds that grow into something amazing over time.
I love that analogy. And it actually reminds me of something we were talking about earlier about how our whole lives can be acts of worship.
Oh yeah, that's a really powerful idea.
When we start seeing our lives through that lens, it changes our whole perspective, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it's profound.
In what ways?
Well, for one, our focus shifts away from ourselves and more towards God. Our successes, they become less about us and more about recognizing God's gifts and being thankful for them.
So it's not about, look what I did. It's more like, look what God did through me.
Exactly. And when we fail, which we all do, it's less about beating ourselves up and more about learning from those experiences and realizing that we need God's grace and guidance to help us along the way.
Yeah, it's like letting go of the need to control everything and just surrendering to a higher power.
Yes, that surrender is incredibly freeing. We don't have to be perfect. We can embrace our flaws, knowing that God loves us no matter what.
That's a really important message, especially in a world that's so focused on achievement and constantly comparing ourselves to others.
It is. Our worth isn't tied to what we achieve. It comes from our relationship with God.
And when we really grasp that, it changes how we live our lives. Our priorities change. Our relationships become deeper and more meaningful. We find a sense of peace that goes beyond all the ups and downs of life.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it?
The devotional also mentioned that this can affect how we treat others.
Yes. It reminds us to see each person as a beloved child of God, worthy of respect and compassion.
Like that saying, treat everyone you meet as if they were God in disguise.
I love that. And if we approach our interactions with that kind of mindset, it changes how we communicate, how we handle disagreements, how we build community.
It's like we become channels for God's love, sharing the kindness and forgiveness that we've received from Him with others.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And at the end of the day, that's really what this deep dive is all about. Elevating our worship isn't just about rituals or traditions. It's about transforming our hearts and minds so our whole lives become expressions of love, gratitude, and service to God.
Yeah, it's about finding those moments of connection, big or small, and letting them shape who we are.
So to our listeners, as you go about your day, carry this idea with you. Let your life be an act of worship. Find those little ways to express gratitude, to be kind to others, to live with intention and purpose. You might be surprised at how much grace and joy you find along the way.
That's a great place to wrap up, I think. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We hope you found some inspiration and new ideas to elevate your worship experience.
And remember, this is just the beginning. We would love to hear your thoughts on how you are incorporating these ideas into your own lives.
Yeah. You can find us on social media. We're at The Deep Dive Pod. Until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.